Hey, Dicken, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'm so excited for our conversation. For those of you who are not familiar with Dicken, if you'd just please share with everyone a little bit about yourself and your journey that's led you to where you are today and spreading the message of the three principles around the world, and also share a little bit about what the three principles are so people can have a better understanding of what that is.
Okay, well, thanks, Donnell. Um, I, I'm a psychologist and an educator. I had been practicing as a psychologist for 10 years, and I came across a man who had discovered the fundamental principles, universal principles that can explain every bit of human psychological experience. And the field of psychology at that time, there were 450 different theoretical approaches to therapeutic intervention. So there was a lot of theories. There were no universally agreed upon fundamental principles or forces that people could point to as what creates human experience. And psychology was very interested in thought content, feeling content, and behavioral content. All of those things had already been created. So when we talked to people, we talked about what they had already experienced, what they had already thought, felt, or done. So we were basically always talking with people about the past and then pointing towards something in their life as the reason why they were experiencing what they were experiencing. Well, we found out now that that's not very scientific. Um, and the three principles are thought, consciousness, and mind. So I can go anywhere in the world and talk to people about the fact that they think. Everybody agrees. It's not a theory. It's how human beings are wired up to have experience. Without thought, we would be mentally dead. We'd have no mental activity. Without consciousness, we would not be able to be aware of life. Everybody's has the ability to be aware of life. And awareness takes form as our senses, so we can see and hear and feel and taste. Thank goodness for consciousness. I wouldn't be able to see you or talk to you, Donnell. So it's it's a beautiful gift that we're given to experience life. And we have a mind, and for centuries, people have thought that the mind was just the brain. But now we know that we're all connected to the energy of life itself, and that there's an intelligence built into that energy because it knows how to create everything that we see in life. Everything was created from a formless field of energy. Some people call it the quantum field. Some people call it our spiritual nature. Some people call it the energy field of infinite potential. Uh, many. Some people call it God. Many different names have been used to try and point toward that there's something that generates life, something that creates life. Something in the same way we wouldn't call a computer if it wasn't able to compute. And without an external source of energy, the computer wouldn't function. And in the same way, our physical system wouldn't function unless we were metaphorically plugged into an energy source that's generating mental activity, generating our experience moment to moment. Now, this becomes very helpful and practical because now we can say everything a human being feels, all the feelings we have, are created by the power of thought. And if a sad thought is created in us, we'll feel consciousness brings it to life and we'll feel sad. If you have an anxious thought, you'll feel anxious. If you have a loving thought, you'll feel loving. Happy thought, you feel happy. In other words, we're always only feeling whatever mental activity is created in that moment. And as simple as that is, for centuries, if you ask people, what are you feeling? Well, we're going to have a wide range of feelings. Everybody does. That's normal. But the problem becomes when you ask people, where do you think your stress comes from? Where do you think your unhappiness is coming from? Because that's what people want relief from. Chronic stress is the main cause of unhappiness in any human being. We're meant to feel stress, but not to live in it.
Mhm.
We're meant to be happy, but not to live in unhappiness. So it's a very, very relevant question. And everybody I've asked tens, thousands of people all over the world because I do seminars in the three principles all over the world. In all over Europe and Eastern Europe and Scandinavian countries, and we're all the same. We all think, we all are conscious, so we can become aware of the fact that we think and how it creates our experience. And we all have a mind that's far more capable than we've realized. And so when I've asked tens of thousands of people, where do you think your feelings come from? Nobody says, well, that's obvious, is what thoughts I'm living in right at this moment. People will point toward their past, the situation, the traffic is causing me to be upset.
Especially in Atlanta where I
It's
live.
very, I mean, as kids, we grow up hearing, you upset me, you hurt my feelings, you made me feel this way. Well, can you imagine if we actually had the power to create feelings in people? I could point at any person and tell them what to feel, and they'd have to feel it. And yet, very often we say, you made me upset, you hurt my feelings, you're stressing me out. They'll point toward personality, they'll point toward genetics, they'll point toward how you were parented, they'll point toward uh, biochemistry, they'll point toward something in the physical world, thinking that that has the power to create. Well, nothing that's already taken form in the physical world has the power to create. There is a power that creates. And that's what the three principles are about and what they're pointing to. And boy, I tell you, you want to know practical. I can remember the very first class I took in these three principles. It was a 5-day program for professionals to introduce them to this new understanding. Um, I'm sitting in my hotel room. I'm thinking about a meeting that's coming up a week later. I'm starting to have dialogues in my head with people that are going to be at the meeting because I know it's going to be a difficult meeting. I'm getting more and more anxious as I think about this meeting. And I think it was the first time that suddenly I became aware that I was thinking up anxiety. I'm sitting in a beautiful hotel room on a nice summer day in a beautiful city. I was in Tampa, Florida, and I'm getting all anxious. And as soon as I realized that my thinking was creating my anxiety, then at that very moment, I have a choice. Keep thinking about what I was thinking about that's creating more and more anxiety, or just come back to the present moment and stop thinking about what I was thinking about. And when I came back to the present moment and stopped thinking about the meeting, my anxiety went away. Oh, wow, isn't that interesting?
Now, is that something you had struggled with for a while, experiencing feelings of anxiety?
Yeah, and here I was a psychologist for 10 years, and I still had a lot of anxiety.
Mhm.
I didn't even know the degree to which I was so used to thinking about things like this meeting in a way that would make me anxious, creating an imaginary future and then getting worried about it. And after I had that insight, that first insight that I'm thinking of innocently thinking of my own anxiety, or more accurately, the thoughts created in me are creating this anxiety, and I have free will. I can keep thinking things, or I can let go of thoughts. I can let go of thinking about something. And after that one insight, I think I had 60% less anxiety just from that one insight. Just from the insight, my anxiety is not coming from my situations, it's being created by my own thinking. And then I started seeing, well, that's true with when I get upset. And I started seeing when I let go of the thinking that makes me upset, I get over it quickly, just like little kids do. And I became more and more resilient. And that's what I wanted for all of my clients. I wanted them to be resilient. It's one of the biggest hallmarks of mental well-being is if you're resilient, you're healthy
Mhm.
psychologically. The biggest problem for any human being is that they start getting caught up in thinking that lowers their quality of feeling. And then they keep thinking about things in a way that keeps creating that feeling that leads to chronic stress, chronic anxiety, chronic depression, chronic unhappiness. And without that, the person would be healthy.
Mhm.
Chronic stress is at the base of every single psychological problem any human being has. In other words, we get caught up in some thinking that creates tension and stress in us. And we keep holding on to that thought and thinking it's true. That's the only way any of us have a problem psychologically. I started working with all kinds of clients, and I started seeing they all had the same problem. Every client I had, they get caught up in some thinking that creates more and more tension, and that makes them unhappy or stressed or depressed or miserable. Then they've come for help. And then every client who I had who started to understand that it was thought creating their feelings. It was this creative power of thought that generated that experience. It wasn't being caused by something in the world. It's so empowering to begin to feel like you're not a victim of what happens to you.
Mhm. Most certainly.
Does that make sense? I mean, it was
Yeah.
one client after another were waking up out of holding on to negative thought, becoming more present, where they become more conscious. Their senses become more awake and more alive. That's the foundation of happiness and experiencing beauty in life. And then as their thinking quiets down without all that negative thinking covering up their inner well being, they would naturally and automatically start feeling better and feeling, feeling closer to people around them.
Mhm.
And that's what love is. So they would have more peace of mind, more happiness, and more connection with life and with people. One of the things that I learned from my teacher, Sydney Banks, this man who had this profound realization, some people call it an enlightenment experience. He went from being a ninth grade educated welder to teaching in universities, teaching to doctors and lawyers. And one university created a Sydney Banks Foundation because now, for the first time in the field of psychology, we had universal principles that could explain them, explain human experience. And it helped people right away. My clients were, instead of seeing them for 6 months to 2 years, I was seeing them for a few sessions. 3 to 10 sessions was like 10 sessions now became long-term therapy. Any human being, no matter how, I worked with people that spent their life in mental institutions who started to wake up to how their thinking created their feelings and experience, who started to realize that they had perfect well-being inside when they weren't holding on to any of those thoughts that lowered their spirits, free of judgments, free of shoulds, free of negative thoughts, free of memories that were painful, just fully present. I've never met a person when they weren't fully present, their well-being didn't come forward and they were kind and friendly and could laugh and enjoy things.
Beautiful.
I had never found anybody up to the time I met Sydney Banks who could look me in the eye and say, Dicken, you're like every other person in this world. When your mind quiets down, you have access to perfect well-being and to wisdom, this deeper intelligence. And I've never come across anybody that was saying people had perfect well-being inside. It just gets covered over by the thoughts that we're caught up in and holding on to and think are true. Never. And I tell you, it touched something very deep in me because I felt like it was true, because I could experience very easily when I stopped thinking about things and just became present and just relaxed into this moment as it was. For no reason, I'd start feeling better. I already had well-being. Everything else in psychology said you have to work really hard to develop your well-being. And Sydney Banks says, no, it's built into us. He would say things like, this invisible dimension of life energy, we're all connected to it. You can't not be connected to the life energy around us and in us. It's what's living us and creating us. This is what he realized in his enlightenment experience, was that this was true. And it was helping people very, very quickly. They began to realize I'm a thinker. Whatever I think, I'm going to feel, no exception. When my thinking changes, my feelings will change, no exceptions. Doesn't matter what the situation is. It helped me understand myself and my wife and my kids better when I first learned this. Oh, they're just caught up in some thinking right now. No wonder they're feeling that way. And I could see when they would come back to being present and not holding on to those thoughts, they too would feel better. And no one had ever taught us that you have perfect well-being inside at all times because you're connected to this infinite field of energy characterized by creative potential, awakeness, awareness, aliveness, and an intelligence that knows how to guide people. That's another huge part of this teaching. The principle of mind is pointing toward the intelligence behind life. And in human beings, we often call that wisdom. Much more helpful than IQ,
Mm.
much more helpful. When people become really present, they have more common sense, more ability to know what's right to do. It's called wisdom because it moves us toward well-being and connection to people in a positive way, toward life. It's uplifting. And it's built into everybody. It's built into everybody. I started seeing that when I was in a difficult situation, when my mind was clear and present, and I was in a deeper feeling of well-being, I always did better, always. And when I was caught up in my negative thinking and feeling upset, that's not a good time to make decisions. That's not a good time to have an important conversation. It's not a good time to try and be an effective parent. I started going, oh my gosh, if I'm just aware of the quality of state of mind I'm in, I can do the bulk of my parenting when I'm at my best and not when I'm at my worst. Completely changed my parenting overnight. Parenting became fun and much easier because I was dealing with my kids when I was at my best.
I'm sure they
Well,
appreciated that.
they not only appreciated it, but after a while they would say, Dad, you got to go take a chill pill. You got to go calm down and then come back so we can talk about something important. They liked the dad that came rather than parenting from my low moods when I was irritated, annoyed, bothered. I'd take responsibility for that feeling as my thinking,
Mhm.
let it go, become resilient, get over it, and then have clarity, perspective, common sense, love, and go talk to them. And they liked that parent better. They wanted that parent. And it didn't matter how I was parented when I was grown up. It just made sense to me that it's normal for human beings to go up and down different states of mind. We call that moods. Everybody I know has moods. Sydney Banks had moods. But with understanding, when you go into a low mood, you don't start blaming something in the world for what you're feeling. You just have a low mood, you know it's thought. You're not tempted to hold on to that thinking or analyze why you're in that low state. So you get over it quickly. We become very resilient as adults. Most adults, it's interesting, Donnell, most adults, when they feel upset, you know what they do?
What's
More
that?
thinking.
Yes. I can
They do
relate to
more
that.
thinking.
Yeah. Try to
Innocently.
analyze it, try to figure out why I'm thinking this way. Is it right or wrong? I shouldn't be thinking this way. Where did
What
this
to
thought
do
come
about it?
from?
How do I deal with this? On and on and on. The more education I got, the more thinking I did when I was in a low mood.
Hmm.
'Cause I had more theories and ideas and trying to figure out what's going on and what to do about it. Now, when I get upset, it's no big deal. It's just a natural flow of low quality thought.
Yeah, could you go more into that regarding intellect versus wisdom? Because I think this could be very helpful for people, including myself.
The intellect is a beautiful thing. It's like when we're born, It's an evolutionary development or to develop our intellect so we can think conceptually. That's a beautiful, beautiful thing. The brain, the intellect, our computer is built to store information and store memory and makes it available to us so we have that information available to us so that we can think about things conceptually, we can analyze, and so we can communicate. We use concepts to communicate. Language is just concepts.
Mhm.
So it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But like any other tool, you can misuse it or not understand how to use it wisely. It's just like if you give a laptop computer to a 5-year-old, they won't know how to use it and they'll do all kinds of things like my grandson who played around with my laptop when he was that age, and he eliminated my whole desktop. And I went through two different computer experts until they figured out that it was like 1 in a million he could have done this. He just hit all the right combination of keys and he eliminated everything. And I couldn't get anything. I couldn't get it back. I didn't know where it went.
Oh.
And it took a long time to restore it back. Well, it's the same with our mind. But Donnell, here's the good thing. Is I like thinking about things. And I like analyzing sometimes, and it's helpful. Like if I have to figure out what time to leave for the airport, and I have to figure out all the times, and I'll leave the present moment and analyze and think about it. It's helpful to have access to memories that are helpful to us. We wouldn't be able to drive a car if we didn't have information stored we could retrieve spontaneously while we're driving. So it's a very useful tool, but the instant we misuse it, it starts creating tension or stress or upset. And that's a signal we're starting to get caught up in thought, holding on to thought in a way that it's blocking us from having access to our well-being or wisdom. Now, wisdom is when any human being is not thinking, thoughts still occur to them. It's the essence of creativity. You get quiet and something pops into your mind. You can't remember somebody's name. You're trying hard to remember it. You're going through the alphabet. Finally, you stop, and then you're just walking along, and the name pops into your head. You're taking a test. You can't remember something. You get really present for a moment, and then all of a sudden you remember the information you need for the test. Wisdom is what brings us new and fresh thinking that's not stored in our intellect. Wisdom can access the intellect and bring it forward, like when you remember a name. They can access what's stored in the intellect. When we're caught up in our intellect, we don't have access to new and fresh thinking, though. We don't have access to the thinking that creates the feelings that uplift us. Peace, joy, and love. You can't think your way to peace, joy, or love. When your mind clears, you can get answers to problems. You can get insights. You get inspiration. You get motivation. You get clarity, perspective, common sense. New and fresh thinking comes from this deeper intelligence when we're not caught up in our intellect. Now, you want to get the best of both worlds. You want to be able to store information and retrieve it, that the information that's helpful you want. That's really a good thing, right? But you don't want to try and use your intellect to solve a problem completely because you'll never get any new and fresh thinking. If you only access what you already know, you won't be able to have any insight into something you haven't realized yet. So then you want to get you want to live from wisdom, let that guide you through life. When I get present, wisdom moves my body without my having to do it. If I stand up and walk out of this room, my legs are changing direction constantly without my using my intellect to do that. It does that so I don't bump into things. It's amazing. This intelligence has always been there. When we're present, it guides us. Right? So like if you're driving a car, you can't do chronic thinking while you're driving, or you'll have accidents left and right. Anybody knows that and has experienced what happens if you leave the present too long to think about things. So you can't be in your intellect completely while you're driving your car, or you wouldn't be able to drive. So we get present, we're driving along really fast, and our hands are continually moving the wheel. And we're not using our intellect to figure out how far to turn it and when to turn it back. Wisdom is the intelligence that moves our hands so that it's making life and death decisions for us. That's why it's called wisdom. If you're in a crisis situation, people always say, stay calm. They never say, think yourself into a frenzy.
I remember that book you read and
Yes, that's right. You don't want to be sitting there trying to go into your computer and remember things. You want to be present and let wisdom bring you what's in your computer that's helpful and useful.
Mhm.
And it knows how to do that. That's that deeper intelligence. It's the same intelligence that knows how to turn a flower toward the sun or grow branches of a tree so that the leaves optimize the amount of light that they can receive.
Mhm.
That's that intelligence working in nature. That same intelligence is what knows how to create nature, create life, and operate it. And we're connected to that. And in schools, it's all based on information learning. And more now, we see we need to help kids begin to understand how their minds work so that they not only do well in school, but they do well in their lives,
Mhm.
that they learn about well-being. They learn about how thought works so they can uncover their well-being more and more frequently so that they can have clarity and make good decisions and feel connected to people in a positive way. We want our kids to know that. That's the most important thing. Things I wanted my kids to learn:
Mhm.
how to live from well-being, how to be happy, how to not get caught up in unnecessary stressful thinking. I really wanted my kids to learn that so they could be resilient. And my kids did learn that. And it's made a huge difference in the quality of their life.
How did you go about teaching that or sharing that with them? As a new mother myself now, I am in a lot of mom Facebook groups, and I often see posts of women sharing either about themselves experiencing anxiety, depression, things like that, and or their children being diagnosed at very young ages, sadly,
Yes, I know.
4 or 5 years old. With maybe anxiety, depression, and as you use the word innocently, I like that. They're innocently, just don't have the awareness of what you're sharing today. So, what do you suggest, or what has been helpful with how you shared this information with your children, and how maybe parents can do that with their own children?
Well, when I first learned this from Sydney Banks, there were really no books, no tapes. We were just sort of learning as best we could from Sid Banks. And then doing the best we could to apply that. So when I first learned this, I was so excited because I could see the immediate effect it had on my well-being to not be so involved in anxious thinking, to be more present. And it's only when we're present we can experience well-being. You can never think your way to well-being. No one can. It's not personal. It's how we're wired up. As well-being is what begins to fill us up when our minds are quiet or present. So I started noticing that myself and every human being has shifts in the quality of their thinking during the day. That's what we call moods. And I started seeing that as a normal psychological event. Everybody has moods. Everybody has shifts in the quality of their thinking. It's like inhale is oxygen, exhale is carbon dioxide, it's waste. You eat food, you eliminate waste. It's a natural cycle. You have cycles in our psychological thinking too. We have high moods, we have low moods. When human beings have low moods, there's more judgment in their thinking. That's why they start judging themselves. They start judging other people. They start judging the world. It's the foundation of unhappiness is judgmental thinking. And with understanding, you come into a low mood and you know it's just a drop in the quality of your thinking, so it's not a problem. It's natural. And you know that you don't want to grab on to our wasteful thoughts, our negative thoughts, because if you do, it creates suffering. So you just let it go through. And if you know that it's thought, you're not blaming your kids for why you're upset. Doesn't have anything to do with them. It has to do with what you're thinking. You have two different parents. One can be upset, one not. They're looking at the same kid. They have different thinking. That's natural. That's always going to be true. We all have our own thinking, and whatever our thinking is at the time will be our feelings. If you understand that, it can protect you when you go into a low mood, and you know that it's your thinking. You're not blaming kids, so you leave that thinking alone, and before you know it, you've come back up again. And I saw that in my kids, and I hadn't realized yet that you don't want to try and teach people while they're in a low mood, while they're caught up in judgmental thought, negative thought. And yet, my heart went out to my kids when I saw them in a low mood. So I'd run up to them and say, "Oh, you're just in a low mood. That's normal. It's just your thinking. It'll pass. Leave it alone." Well, I've never been successful at teaching people while they're in really low moods, unless they're really open and receptive to learning this. And at that point, my kids were not open and receptive to learning something about their thinking when they were in a low mood. So they put up with it for a couple of weeks. And then after 2 weeks, they came to me and said, "Dad, we've been talking and we've decided if you say one more word about thought or moods, we're going to run away." So that was a huge lesson for me. Excuse me. So I started, first of all, then I stopped trying to teach them when I was in a low state or they were in a low state. And when I was feeling good, I'd wait until they were in a better state. And then I could talk to them about anything. They'd be more open, they'd listen better. Anybody, when they come into a higher mood, feels better, is more cooperative, is more open to learning, listens better. So I started saying, wow, So the first thing that changed wasn't trying to help my kids. It was me being more aware of what state of mind and feeling I was in when I went to try and parent my kids. And I had an insight that was mind-boggling to me. I could be a phenomenal parent if I became a high mood parent rather than a low mood parent, rather than parenting from my annoyance, bother, frustration, impatience. Come on, you guys, pick up your room. How many times do I have to tell you? If you bring a low mood and dump it on somebody else, I've never once seen the other person go, "Oh, thank you. That was helpful. I feel better. I'll be glad to help." It's a little bit like, in my mind, when you have a cold, it's normal to sneeze, but you don't want to run up and sneeze on somebody. And psychologically, I was sneezing my low moods onto my kids, and it was not making them more loving and cooperative and helpful. It made them more resistant, and they would stop listening. And because my daughter was 14, my son was 9. But when I was in a good state, I could talk with them about anything and have a really good talk and not blaming and be open to finding new ways of doing something, solutions that worked well for both of us.
Mhm.
It became fun. It was like, oh my God, parenting is just having good conversations with people when you're both at your best. Because it isn't interesting. Every problem in parenting, as well as in any relationship, is when you have two people in a low mood thinking it's a good time to try and talk about things. Guaranteed conflict. And it gets old pretty quick. With our friends, they bring a good mood to us consistently. We say, that's my friend. With the people we don't like, they bring their low mood consistently to us. And we say, oh, they're horrible people. They're just mean and nasty.
Yep.
Everybody's best friend is somebody else's enemy, so to speak. It's depend on what mood they see and then identify you as,
Mhm.
right? So I changed my identity as a parent from a not such good listener, parenting the way I was parented. You have to do what I say because I'm the parent. I'm almost a little embarrassed about it now, but that was pretty common back then. Um, and then if kids didn't do something the way you wanted to, you'd get upset with them and tell them.
Mhm.
And I didn't. I realized I didn't have to be that kind of parent, a low mood parent. I realized I could be a kind, loving, compassionate parent consistently. Not that I would feel that way consistently, but I could time my parenting as best I could. And when I was in a really low mood, I if I had to intervene, I would, but I would do as little parenting and teaching as possible. And I see so many parents trying to teach kids while they're upset, trying to teach. It's important to teach your kids. It's important to share your values, but you want to do it when people are open and receptive to hearing something new,
Mhm.
to having insights that's helpful. So it's learning. For me, the word I started using was timing. If I'm going to be going up and down, that's normal. I get to time when I make decisions, when I think about things, when I parent, when I talk to my wife about important matters, when I get to, just by being self-aware of my feeling, I'll know when I'm at my best. That's all. It didn't mean I didn't have low moods. I did. It didn't mean I'd get upset, but I just come back to the present moment and wait patiently. And always then my thinking would start flowing instead of being stuck, and I would calm down and start feeling better. And when I felt better, I had more common sense. I did better as a parent. I started calling it common sense parenting. I
So,
did a free series of classes in our community called Common Sense Parenting. And I had tons of parents come and they loved learning about, oh, I'm a thinker. I go up and down. Oh, that's normal. Oh, it's okay to get upset or be upset. Yeah. But if you understand where it's coming from and take responsibility for your feelings, it'll simplify your life enormously because you won't feel victimized by external events. Circumstances don't have the power to create any feeling. You could take the worst circumstance in the world, Donnell, put 100 people in it, you'll have 100 different reactions depending on where people's thinking go. Some people freak out, some people be angry, some people be calm, some people be loving and compassionate. And that's always true. Research has proven that adversity doesn't cause stress. You're as likely to be calm and compassionate as you are to be stressed.
mhm,
600 studies or something like that have shown that situations can't cause stress. And yet, that's what almost every person I've ever met believes
yeah.
innocently. Now we're teaching this all over the world, and people are starting to catch on.
Yeah, and to your point, it's very freeing to not feel like you're a victim to the world and your circumstance.
Very,
Yeah.
very freeing.
Mhm.
It changed me more than any other psychological theory had been able to.
Mhm.
And I started seeing that was true not just for me, but for my kids, for my clients, for every human being.
Mhm.
We all go up and down. The biggest danger for human beings is in a low mood, you grab onto one of those low mood thoughts and start analyzing it or holding on to it and thinking it's true. That's the only way people can suffer psychologically.
Mhm.
The only way. I worked with a woman who had been clinically depressed for years and years. She had been abused by her father when she was young. She had been seen many psychiatrists and psychologists, and she was just weary because she felt like what had happened to her when she was younger was causing her to be miserable. So she felt victimized by her past.
Mhm.
And when I first started talking to her about that, you did go through a trauma, but the trauma is not happening now. What's happening now is not the trauma, it's the memories you brought with you from that circumstance get reactivated over and over again when you're in a low mood. But it's just thought, and no thought can hurt you. And if you know it's thought and not something you have no control over, if you realize it's thought, the feeling then lets you know the only problem is you're holding those thoughts and thinking they're true. If you let go of those thoughts and come back to the present moment, in the present moment, you can't be present and think at the same time. And the present moment is our most natural position. We're born into it. We come back to it over and over again during the day. Everybody does. I could follow anybody around and say, now you're present, now you're present. And you'll see that only when you're present do you start to feel better. So she started catching on to this. Oh my gosh. She started, she stopped doing all the thinking she was doing when she dropped into a low mood. One researcher said people who are depressed 85% of the day are caught up in thinking negative thoughts. let's say that changed to 65 instead of 85. Already the person's life has improved dramatically. If it's 15% rather than 85%, you'll see it's the person's no longer depressed. They're just having low moods, which is normal. You're still going to have them. Depression is an extended low mood because we hold on to those thoughts and we stay in that feeling. We think those thoughts are true. I'm no good. I'm worthless. I'm unlovable. If you think those thoughts are true, you will suffer terribly. If you know it's just wasteful thoughts, you eat food, you have waste. What do you do with waste? You flush it. Nothing to analyze, nothing to figure out, nothing to do with it other than flush it. It's normal, it's natural, but
Yeah.
let it go.
It's interesting the importance we place on our thoughts.
Oh my gosh. I used to think my thinking and feelings were more real than my being present and happy feelings. I did.
Mhm.
And innocently, as a psychologist for the first 10 years, I'd ask people to talk about things that had happened in their past and it'd dredge up all these painful memories and they'd get really upset. And I thought that was how people got better. I'm going, oh, good, you're getting it out. Those negative feelings are inside you. Well, they're not inside of you, they're created by thought in the moment.
Mhm.
We don't have guilt inside of us, anger inside of us, sadness inside of us. We're more like a movie projector. Whatever's on the film, the light of consciousness brings it to life on the screen of our experience. And if it's on the film, it's on the screen. If it's in your thinking, it's in your feeling. But as soon as the film changes, you get a different movie.
Mhm.
As soon as you let go of negative, you start getting a more positive movie, not by thinking positive, but because that's our nature. It's innate. Our well-being is innate.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction as well, is not to think we need to change our thinking necessarily as well. I think there's a lot of things you can read about that and seminars you can take. And if you just think better, and things like that. And that can, I feel like, be a little misleading as well.
Yes, that's a very common misunderstanding. People go, "Oh, it's my thinking," so I have to monitor my thinking and make it more positive. It's a lot of work, and substituting positive for negative. Positive thoughts are based on memory, so it's not new and fresh positive. It's what you think is positive.
Mm.
And it's powerful to realize if you leave your thinking alone, you'll come back to the present moment. And in the present, whatever negative thoughts we're holding on to will fall away. And the longer we're just living life in the present moment, the quieter our mind gets. And then our well being starts shining through. So the metaphor that's been around for thousands of years is the oldest psychological metaphor. When we're caught up in negative thought, it creates a storm cloud, so it's very dark. We look out through a dark lens, the world looks dark. When we get present, we're stepping back into the blue sky, and the clouds start to part. When they part, the sun comes out. The sun is always there, waiting to shine through. So I'm working with another woman who's depressed. And within 10 minutes of her coming in the office, she became present and she began to laugh as people lighten up when they're really present. She began to laugh, and I said, "Oh, well, right now you're not depressed. See, there's the clouds parting and the sun coming out. You work like anybody else. That's perfect." And she goes, "Oh, no, I'm still depressed." Because she didn't know it was moment to moment. She didn't know that the instant we're not holding on to negative thought, the clouds part. You have a sunbreak. That's what they call it here in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to have sun breaks today. The clouds will be there, but then they part and the sun will break through and shine through. You could say the sun is mind. You could say the blue sky is consciousness. You could say the weather we have is thought. It's a metaphor, but it's a very, very old metaphor. And it's helpful to people to think I already have that light of being, that light of consciousness inside, and that when I let go of heavy thoughts, I'll lighten up. Literally, literally. I mean, we can see that with their kids. They're having a temper tantrum because you said they can't have candy, and you just be kind to them and wait and don't take it personally and go about your business. And before you know it, they're over it and they lighten up again. Or you learn how to distract your kids. So they want candy, and you say, "Hey, but let's go outside. I'll push you on the swing." And they love swinging, and so they stop thinking about the candy in a way that's making them upset. They become present, thinking about the swing, and immediately the sun comes out, and they feel better. So it takes the mystery out of behavior.
Mhm.
Of course, you're feeling the way you do, given the thoughts you must be caught up in. And when you're not caught up in those thoughts, you won't feel that way, even if the situation stays exactly the same.
Now, the example you just gave of the woman with the depression, do you feel or have you seen in your experience that some people, when they're given a diagnosis, again, innocently, that they're given the diagnosis of depression or anxiety or ADHD or these things, that they kind of, their minds or their thoughts attach to that diagnosis and it can keep them in that place, sort of feeling stuck?
Sometimes diagnoses are a relief to people because they go, "Oh, there's a reason why I am the way I am." Even if it's not the right reason, for some people, it's relief. They can say, "Well, I have this condition. I have ADHD. That explains why I am the way I am." But it doesn't cure. A diagnosis doesn't cure people. It labels them.
Mhm.
Cure is comes with understanding or insights, not intellectual understanding, but realizations, understanding gained through insight. And everybody is capable of having insight. Every human being, as long as a person's alive, they're capable of having a new and fresh thought. They're capable of being present because it doesn't take energy to be present. It takes energy to think about things and not be present. So people are capable of having insight. Anybody is. Any person that I've ever worked with, I know they're a thought away from shifting their level of understanding by insight, thought away from jumping to a higher level of consciousness, a thought away from moving to a higher level of well-being, where they're still going to have their ups and downs, but with more understanding. They go through their downs gracefully and live much longer in present, natural, positive feeling. That's very hopeful for anybody. Very hopeful. And then you're less and less interested in labels that are put on people when they're at their worst, because that's not who they are. That's just the thinking they're caught up in temporarily. When they let go of that, what happens to the diagnosis? Because I've worked with people with every kind of psychiatric diagnosis, and their one problem is they get caught up in low mood thinking and don't know it, and don't know that they're connected to that they have perfect well-being inside. No one has ever told them that. They say you have a disease or an illness.
Mhm.
This is the opposite. No, you don't. You have perfect well-being inside. You're just continually caught up in negative thought, and it's creating chronic stress for you. And that manifests, chronic stress manifests psychologically in many different ways. Some people become passive, some people become violent, some people become depressed, some people really anxious, some people chronically sad. It can show up in many different kinds of behavior. The diagnostic manual for psychology and psychiatry, when I started psychology, it was very thin. And every year it got thicker and thicker. We got better at labeling people when they were upset and saying that's who they are, that's their illness. It's not an illness. It's a it's a misunderstanding about how the mind works. And as soon as people insightfully clear up that misunderstanding, they hold on to negative thought less and less, and they stop thinking that those thoughts are true. I am horrible. I am unloving. I hate this. I hate that. I can't do this. I can't do that. All of a sudden, they're just thoughts, and they're low quality thoughts. And when we come back up, our thinking becomes clearer and clearer, more and more positive naturally. It's built into everybody. It can't be. Our well being is energy based, not memory based. So it can't be damaged. You can't damage energy, pure energy. It's formless. Scientists are saying
That's
the
beautiful. I
universe
have to
is,
pause you for a second there because I
yes,
want people to like soak that in right there, what you just shared. I think that's just it's so freeing, like I said before, and so many people I know that suffer because of having these different diagnoses that, again, innocently have been put on them and not realizing their true essence and true well-being. So I just wanted to pause and let everybody take a moment to let all
yeah,
that you just shared sink in.
yeah. Thank you. It's good to let this sink in.
Mhm.
That's what I used to do. Is I mean, there's a website now that has Sid's teachings on it, the books he's written. There's about 5 books that he wrote and that are published, 6 now. Um, and lots of his talks are available for free on Sydney, SYDNEY, SydneyBanks.com. And I would listen to him, but then I would pause it and let it sink in. Like you said, no, because he kept saying things that just hit me. Wow, wow. And I'd pause it and let it sink in. And then my misunderstandings would get cleared up that way, and I'd have a clearer way of understanding, first of all, my own state of mind and my own built-in capacity for well-being. Boy, did that change me. That was so powerful to hear that. And that we're all thinkers and we don't know it. We're innocent. People haven't been taught where their feelings scientifically come from. Whatever you think you will feel, it's scientific.
Mhm.
That's why 100 people in a horrible situation can have completely different experiences
Mhm.
depending on what state of mind they're in and the amount of understanding they have. So everybody's doing the best they can given what they understand about this. And as our understanding goes up, we do better and better. Life gets easier and easier.
Wow. That's Amazing. Well, I know we're coming up on our time here. I want to be respectful of your time, Dickon. There's so much more I could talk with you about because it's been such a fun conversation. And I had mentioned to you before we started that I had jotted down a few things that I wanted to make sure that we covered. And I think, just the fact that we're all interconnected, you basically covered
Yes.
everything I wanted you to talk about and make sure we talked about. So
Oh,
there's
that's
not really
great.
much that was
Yeah.
left out there.
Oh,
To
good.
say one thing, one other thing is that I don't know if you have a quick moment to share is I feel sometimes people with these, diagnoses, which you so beautifully explained, people just kind of grabbing onto thoughts is what is keeping them in that state. Then they also tend to turn to medications or being prescribed medications, thinking they need to medicate these things. Do you have anything to share regarding that?
I asked a psychiatrist friend of mine to explain to me the role of medication when it comes to well-being. And it's a simple metaphor. If you have a pot of water filled to the brim, put it on a gas stove, turn the burner on high heat, pretty soon it'll get more and more embroiled and it'll start boiling over.
Mhm.
It's the same with our minds. If you hold on to negative thought, it changes your biochemistry. It makes you feel worse and worse. You experience the downside of chronic stress. Well, you can take a tray of ice cubes and drop them into the water, and it'll temporarily help calm down that thinking that's boiling over. When medication works, it's a it's attacking the symptom, not the problem. Understanding the principles is what helps you turn down the heat under the pot by not holding on to as much negative thought, by realizing circumstance doesn't create your feelings. Totally empowering.
Mhm.
It's totally empowering. It's just some thoughts I'm having. It's not what somebody said a year ago to me. Then it's empowering to find out we're connected to a deeper intelligence that if I let go of thought, I don't become dumb, I become wiser. And that wisdom will guide me through any kind of difficulty, any kind of challenge. I'll just know better what to do, what to say, when to say something, when not to say something. That's that deeper intelligence taking form in the moment. So people learn about thought, it helps them be more resilient. They learn about consciousness, they learn more about the power of the present moment. People learn more about mind, they begin to trust more that if you let go of your intellect, you're not avoiding a problem or not dealing with it, you're opening it up to wisdom's response to that problem. It'll be helpful. So we're back to the three principles again.
Yep, circle back to where the foundation of it all, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, Dickon. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your time. And one last final question that I'll be asking all my guests. If this was your last message for whatever reason that you could share to the world, what would you want to leave as that message to this generation and future generations to come?
Go and enjoy yourself. And if at any point you realize you're not enjoying yourself, if you realize that feeling is thought, it, why would I hold on to that thought any longer than I need to if it's making me feel this way? It'll bring you back to the present moment. You'll be open then to love and wisdom, and you'll be on your way again, enjoying life. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. You don't want to be thinking about your thinking. You want to see the benefits of relaxing into the present deeper and deeper and accessing your own natural well-being. I talk a lot. I have a YouTube channel and I have lots of talks about this. That's another resource for people if they want to learn more about these principles.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was wanting you to share about that as well. And I know you have a book also. Would you like to share a little bit about that before we sign off? There
It's
it
called,
is. All right, coming
it's called
home.
Coming Home, Uncovering the Foundations of Psychological Well-Being. I wrote it with my friend Natasha Swerdloff. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
Uh, she's a colleague and friend from Denmark, and we're finishing our second book now that's trying about the principles. So the first one's called Coming Home.
Nice. All right. Do we know when the second book will be out or not yet?
Um, it's I know we're not we
Not
don't
there yet.
set deadlines.
Okay.
We work when we're inspired, and
Yeah.
we finished it. We're going back through it again,
Okay.
final time, and then we've been through it a few times already, but this is our final time, and then it'll go to our editor, and then as soon as it's finished being edited, we can publish it.
All right, great. Well, coming in the near future, something to look forward to.
Life with ease or living with ease, where it'll be
Okay.
called something like that. Yeah,
Nice. All right. We'll keep a lookout for it.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dicken. I really greatly appreciate the time. And you've been so impactful. Your wisdom has been so impactful in my life. And I'm so grateful now that I can have this wisdom as a parent myself and
I
hopefully pass this
know.
on to
I
my son
know.
and future generations to come. So,
Oh, thanks, Donnell. That's
yeah.
been great being with you. Thanks.
Thank you.